Hello. Last night we heard the news about the massacre in Orlando, with the death of over 50 people and injuries of many, many more, at the hands of somebody we can only assume to be a borderline psychopath, if not a full-on psychopath. When my partner and I were watching, it brought to mind the incident back in the 90s where a gay pub in London was bombed and people were killed and many injured. These days it's hard to go a month or so without some news incident about Daesh throwing gay people off of tall buildings, people being attacked in Uganda, people being attacked in Russia, people suffering all sorts of instances in many, many countries around the world, some of them in countries which have very bigoted, hostile laws, which makes the lives of LGBT people extremely vulnerable, and even in countries which have theoretically very liberal laws, still we see these sorts of incidences again and again and again. And I think in the light of last night's news incident, pretty much anyone in the LGBT community is going to be acutely conscious of how vulnerable they are. I've never been attacked myself, which is an amazing thing really when you consider I got to middle age peacefully, but many of my friends have been attacked, and some of them not just once, some of them multiple times. They've been beaten up, spat on, had very hostile attacks from other people in this country and in other countries. And it made me think of the role that religions play in fostering hatred of people who are LGBT, particularly religions associated with the book, and so many quotes and verses used from within the Quran, within the Bible and so on, to justify people's hatred, people's hostility. And it's something that really many of those mainstream religions still have yet to properly tackle. Many of them turn a blind eye, many of them within various different sects and factions within the mainstream religions actively encourage those sorts of attitudes. Maybe not full-on murder, maybe not attacking people with machine guns and so on, but nonetheless a great deal of hostility is seen as the norm for what many religions still perceive as being a sin. But not all religions do. It brought to mind the days of the ancient Greeks, where being what we would call these days gay or lesbian or bisexual, not words they would have used then, but loving somebody of your own gender, or being outside the gender norm, experiencing and expressing different genders, was really not that uncommon, and for the most part embraced and seen in a positive light. Indeed, within some sections of ancient polytheist societies, it was seen as a positive blessing rather than as a curse or an excuse to give vent to violence and brutality and mayhem in other people's lives. So I'd like to tell you a story, quite a short one, from Greek myth about the Spartan prince Hyakinthus. It does end rather sadly, but then the news at the moment is rather sad, so maybe that's in keeping. Hyakinthus, warrior prince of Sparta, fresh from battle, dived into a great clear pool of water and washed the blood from these many wounds, earned as a warrior's pride in the battle in which he had been so victorious. And once cleansed of the blood, he emerged from the water, shook it off, 1,000 diamond sparklets of water flying hither and yon, and he went and lay on a great flat rock in the sun, with the hot Greek sun beating down on him, drying his skin. Now, to some people, sunlight is nothing but photons, which it is, in fairness, photons. But some of us know that those photons are not mindless atoms. They are thinking, feeling. They are the flesh, the blood, the soul, the mind of Apollo, the radiant lord of light himself. And when the sun came down upon the earth and saw Hyakinthus lying there, beautiful and muscled, lithe and strong and full of life, of energy, of vigour, of dynamism, of passion, of honour and nobility, Apollo fell in love. And the photons, the light beams, fell all over the contours of Hyakinthus' body, exploring him, kissing him, caressing him. And Hyakinthus, lying there half asleep, recovering from the exertions of the battle, dreamt that he was being made love to. But the dream seemed to become more and more real, more and more solid. And Hyakinthus opened one eye and looked and saw a being of such beauty, of such magnificence, of radiance, pure beaming light coming from the very centre of it, that he realised Apollo himself had come to earth, descended from high Olympus to claim him as his own. And from that moment, Hyakinthus fell in love with Apollo as surely as Apollo had fallen in love with Hyakinthus. And God and Prince were as one for the months of summer. They rode together, they played music together, they sang songs together, they exercised together, they played sports together, they practised skills of arms together. They were seen everywhere in each other's company. All through the day, Apollo and Hyakinthus were hand in glove. But of course, during the night hours, Apollo returns to high Olympus to carry out his divine duties in other parts of the world. And in the hours of darkness, Hyakinthus was alone, or at least he thought he was alone. For Apollo was not the only one to fall in love with his charms. The gentle west wind, Zephyrus, had come to be seduced by the beauty that he had seen in Hyakinthus. Now, whereas Hyakinthus had fallen in love with the great golden radiant Apollo, whose charisma, whose charms, whose skills are manifold, he'd barely noticed the presence of the west wind, that gentle breeze that signals the coming spring. Zephyrus was not charismatic. He was not a force of light. He was not the passion of heat. He was not possessed of 1,001 talents. He was not the magnetic being that Apollo is. And the more Zephyrus realised that Hyakinthus was scarcely aware of him, the more it pained his heart. Have we not all, perhaps, at some point in our lives, fallen in love with someone who barely even knows that we're there? And we try and make an impression, but try as hard as we might, we seem to just fade into the wallpaper and become as nothing. Well, that is how Zephyrus felt. And it burned him. It consumed him with that force that the Romans refer to as invidia, that envy that not only craves what somebody else has, but comes to resent the fact that they have it, comes to decide to take it from them in the belief that if I cannot have it, they cannot have it. And so there came the day, towards the end of summer, when Apollo and Hyakinthus met for another day of music and laughter and love-making and sport-making, and they were busy playing first with javelins and then with a discus, throwing it to one another, jumping up in the air, catching it and throwing it back. And Zephyrus watched from behind the trees, consumed with resentment, consumed with envy. And as he watched, Apollo hurled the discus and it through the air, and Hyakinthus leapt to snatch it from the air. His actions precisely timed with as a well-trained warrior will. But Zephyrus, at the last moment, blew. And the discus was not where Hyakinthus's hand expected it to be. It flew off course and smashed into his head, shattering him with such force that he fell dead to earth, brains and blood leaking into the soil. And Apollo saw. He was heartbroken. He flew like light across the land to embrace his dead lover. But as fast as he went, death went faster. Not even Apollo can outrace Hades. There, bleeding into the soil, was Hyakinthus, prince no more. And there the shade of Hades come to gather his soul. But stay, said Apollo, the tears streaming down his face, his heart heavy and broken with the loss of this beautiful youth. Stay your hand, Hades. He may not be mine, but he shall not be yours either, any more than he shall be Zephyrus's. And even though Apollo could not challenge Hades and bring the dead back to life, he could do the next best thing. He reached out a hand and he touched the dead body, and he sang the ancient songs. worked an act of magic to transform the flesh of Hyakinthus, and from the bloodstains in the soul there grew green shoots up, emerging into the sunlight, to worship Apollo forevermore. And from that day to this, Hyakinthus has been the hyacinth, flower of fragrance and beauty, worshipping the sun. Thank you.